It's not what you think, she said, and for a second, the world actually went quiet. Not loud quiet. Not empty quiet. The kind of quiet that settles in your chest and decides something for you. I stood there in the doorway of my own house, keys still in my hand, the faint hum of the air conditioner pushing cool air across a moment that should have shattered me. Olivia was frozen, halfway between stepping forward and stepping back, like her body couldn't decide which version of the truth to commit to. Ethan stood a few feet behind her, stiff, caught in that awkward posture of a man who just realized he walked into the wrong story. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't drop my keys. I didn't even blink right away. I just looked at them. Really looked. The way you look at something when your brain is trying to catch up to what your eyes already confirmed. People think moments like this explode. That there's shouting accusations, something dramatic enough to match the betrayal. But that's not what happened. What happened was colder. Slower. Final. I stepped inside, closed the door behind me with a soft click, and set my keys down on the hallway table like I'd done 1,000 times before. Routine has a strange power. It makes chaos feel like something you can organize. Olivia's voice cracked again, softer this time. Daniel! I can explain. I nodded once, almost out of habit, like I was acknowledging a coworker in a meeting. Then I said it. Calm. Measured. Good. Because you're both leaving. The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They landed exactly where they were supposed to. On her face first. Then on his. Ethan shifted his weight, like he was about to say something, maybe defend himself, maybe play it off, but he didn't. Smart move. Even he could feel it. This wasn't a fight he understood yet. Olivia shook her head quickly, stepping closer, her voice rising just enough to betray the panic underneath. No, you don't understand, it's not. I raised my hand slightly, not aggressive, just enough to pause the noise. And she stopped. That was the moment everything changed. Not when I walked in. Not when she spoke. But when she realized I wasn't reacting the way she expected. Because here's the truth. By the time I opened that door, nothing in that room surprised me anymore. Not her. Not him. Not the way the air felt heavier than it should have. I leaned against the wall, arms relaxed, posture loose, like I had all the time in the world. Inside, something had already gone quiet days ago. Maybe weeks. It's hard to pinpoint when a man stops hoping and starts knowing. But once it happens, everything after that feels different. Slower. Sharper. I looked at Olivia, really looked this time, and for the first time in years, I wasn't trying to read her emotions. I wasn't trying to fix anything. I was just observing. Like she was part of a situation I had already decided the outcome for. And that's when I saw it. Not guilt. Not exactly. Fear. The kind that creeps in when the script you were relying on suddenly doesn't apply anymore. I pushed myself off the wall and walked a few steps closer, not rushed, not hesitant. Just deliberate. You said it's not what I think. I said, my voice even, almost conversational. That's fine. I glanced past her, briefly meeting Ethan's eyes, then back to hers. Because what I think doesn't matter anymore. And in that second, standing in my own living room, I realized something simple. I wasn't the one losing anything here. Olivia's mouth opened, then closed again, like the words she had prepared no longer fit the situation she found herself in. That happens when someone builds a lie expecting a certain reaction and gets something else entirely. Panic needs friction to grow. It needs shouting, denial, something emotional to push against. I was not giving her that. Ethan cleared his throat behind her, shifting again, trying to reclaim some kind of presence. Hey man, I think we can talk this out, he said, forcing a half smile that did not reach his eyes. I looked at him for a second longer this time, just enough to make him uncomfortable. There is nothing to talk out, I said. Calm. Flat. Final. He nodded like he understood, but he did not. Not yet. Olivia stepped closer, lowering her voice like that would somehow make this more private, more manageable. Daniel, please, you are overreacting. It is not like that, she said, reaching for my arm. I stepped back just enough so her hand met empty air. Not dramatic. Not aggressive. Just absent. That small movement hit her harder than anything I could have said. Her face shifted, confusion mixing with something sharper. Fear was starting to take shape. You think this is the first time I have heard that line? I asked quietly. She froze again, searching my face for something familiar, something she could anchor to. But there was nothing there for her anymore. That is the part people do not understand. It is not the moment you catch someone. It is the moment you stop recognizing them. I walked past her into the living room, taking in the details without really needing to. The glass on the coffee table, the throw blanket folded too neatly, the subtle signs of something staged and interrupted. It all looked exactly like what it was. Temporary. I picked up the glass, glanced at it for a second, then set it back down in the same spot. Control is quiet. It does not rush. Behind me, I could hear her breathing change, quicker now, uneven. Say something, she whispered, and that was the first honest thing she had said since I walked in. She did not want a conversation. She wanted a reaction she could work with. I turned back to face them, leaning slightly against the edge of the table, posture relaxed like I was discussing something routine. I already did, I said. You are both leaving. Ethan let out a short breath, looking toward the door, calculating his exit. Smart again. He grabbed his jacket without another word, avoiding eye contact this time. As he moved past me, I did not stop him. I did not need to. This was not about him anymore. It never really was. The front door opened, then closed, and just like that, the room felt different. Quieter, but not empty. Olivia stood there alone now, arms wrapped around herself, like she was suddenly aware of the space she was standing in. Daniel, please, do not do this, she said, her voice softer, almost careful now. I watched her for a moment, not with anger, not with sadness, just with clarity. This is already done, I replied. And for the first time she understood that whatever version of me she thought she could reach was already gone. She did not move right away. That was the part that almost felt familiar. Olivia had always needed a second to adjust when something did not go her way, like her mind had to rewrite the scene before her body could follow. I had seen that look before, just not like this. Not stripped down. Not exposed. She took a slow step toward me, careful this time, like she was approaching something fragile. Daniel, we can fix this, she said, and there it was again, that instinct to frame everything as temporary, as manageable, as something that could be talked through over dinner and forgotten by morning. For a long time, that used to work. For a long time, I let it. I turned slightly, glancing around the room as if seeing it from a distance, like I was standing inside a memory that had already started to fade. The couch we picked out together after arguing for 3 weekends straight. The framed photo on the wall from a trip to Napa where everything felt easy, uncomplicated. The kitchen where she used to stand on Sunday mornings, barefoot, coffee in hand, asking me about my week like she actually wanted to hear the answer. It is strange how clear things become when they are already over. You do not remember the big moments first. You remember the quiet ones. The normal ones. The ones that made you believe it was all real. Do you remember when we moved in here? I asked, not looking at her yet. My voice stayed even, almost reflective. She blinked, caught off guard by the question. Of course I do, she said quickly, stepping closer, relief flickering for a split second like she thought she had found a way back in. We built everything together, Daniel. That still means something. I let out a slow breath, nodding once. It did, I said. That was the difference. Past tense. Small shift. Permanent meaning. I finally turned to face her fully, and for the first time, I saw her trying to rebuild something in real time, piece by piece, reaching for whatever version of me she thought still existed. We had a plan, she continued, her voice softening, almost pleading now. You said we would grow. Old here. You said this was home. I studied her face, searching for something genuine, something that connected to the woman I thought I knew. But all I saw was someone trying to hold on to an outcome, not a truth. I did say that, I replied. Back when I thought we were building the same thing. Her expression tightened, the words landing heavier than she expected. Silence stretched between us, not uncomfortable, just clear. There was no confusion left in it. Just space. She shook her head slightly, like she was rejecting the version of reality forming in front of her. You are acting like none of it mattered, she said, her voice sharper now, frustration pushing through the fear. Like all of this just disappears because of one mistake. I held her gaze steady, unmoved. This was not one mistake, I said quietly. This was a pattern. You just did not think I was paying attention. And that was the moment it shifted again. Not in the room. In her. Because for the first time, she realized something she had not considered. This was not sudden. This was not impulsive. This had been coming. And she had missed it completely. Her eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in calculation, like she was trying to retrace steps she had never expected to be questioned. What are you talking about? She asked, her voice steadier now, but there was a crack underneath it, something fragile she could not fully hide. I watched her carefully, noticing the shift, the way she was no longer pleading for forgiveness but searching for an angle, a way to regain control of the narrative. That used to be the part one missed. The small transitions. The subtle changes in tone. The difference between someone being sorry and someone being strategic. You stopped asking about my day, I said, not accusing, just stating it like a fact. At first, it was small. You said you were tired? Busy. I believed you. She opened her mouth to respond, but I continued before she could interrupt. Then your phone started staying face down. Not just at dinner. All the time. Even when it buzzed. Her expression flickered, just for a second, but it was enough. That does not mean anything, she said quickly, crossing her arms now, defensive. I nodded slightly. On its own, no. But patterns do. I took a slow step toward the window, glancing out at the quiet street, the same street we had lived on for years, where nothing ever seemed to change. You started going out more. Girls' nights. Wine tastings. Late dinners that turned into later ones. I paused, letting the words settle. You never used to check the time when you were with me. Then suddenly, you were always watching the clock. She shifted her weight, her fingers tightening around her arms. People change, Daniel. That is normal, she said, trying to keep her voice even, but it did not land the way she wanted it to. Yes, I agreed. They do. But they do not change direction without a reason. Silence again, heavier this time. Not empty. Pressing. I turned back to face her, meeting her eyes directly. You stopped being here, I said. Not physically. You were still in the house. But you were somewhere else. That hit her. I could see it in the way her posture softened for just a second before she caught herself. That is not fair, she said quietly. You were gone all the time. Work, trips, meetings. You were not exactly present either. There it was. The shift to justification. Not denial. Not yet. I nodded again, acknowledging it without letting it redirect anything. You are right, I said. I was busy. I was building something for us. That was the difference. She shook her head, frustration rising again. So now this is my fault? You are going to act like you had no part in this? I let a small breath out, almost like a quiet laugh, but without humor. I am not saying I was perfect, I replied. I am saying I paid attention. That was the line that changed everything. Because it reframed the entire situation. Not as a sudden mistake. Not as an emotional reaction. But as something observed. Understood. Chosen. Her face tightened, the realization settling deeper now. This was not a man reacting in the moment. This was a man who had been watching. And the version of me she thought she could explain things to was already several steps ahead of whatever she was about to say. I let the silence stretch just long enough for the weight of it to settle between us, then I walked past her toward the hallway table, reaching into the drawer like it was just another ordinary evening. My fingers closed around my phone, and when I turned back, I did not rush, did not hesitate. I simply held it up, screen dark for a second before it lit in my hand. "You are right about one thing," I said calmly. "People do change." Her eyes followed the movement, cautious now, uncertain. "What you did not expect," I continued, "is that I changed too." I tapped the screen once, then angled it slightly in her direction. Not aggressively. Just enough. Her face tightened as she leaned in, her eyes scanning, trying to process what she was seeing. A timestamp. A location. A still frame pulled from a quiet corner of a place she thought no one was watching. She pulled back quickly, shaking her head. "This is insane," she said, but the confidence was gone now. "You were tracking me?" I tilted my head slightly. "No," I replied. "I was paying attention." That distinction mattered more than she realized. Because tracking sounds obsessive. Watching sounds reactive. But attention? That is deliberate. That is controlled. I moved past her again, setting the phone down on the table like it had already served its purpose. 3 weeks ago, I said, my voice steady, you said you were going to a late dinner with Claire. I glanced at her. Claire was in Chicago that night. She did not respond. She just stared at me, waiting for something to stop this from going further. It did not. 2 weeks ago, I continued, you left early for what you call the morning workout. You drove 40 minutes in the opposite direction of the gym you have been going to for years. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. I stepped closer, not invading her space, just closing the distance enough so she could not pretend this was abstract anymore. Last week, I said, quieter now, you forgot to delete a message. That one hit. I saw it immediately. Her shoulders dropped, just a fraction, like something inside her gave way. I was not looking for it, I added. It was just there. That was the truth. Or at least part of it. Because once you see something like that, you do not unsee it. You follow it. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. So you built this whole story in your head, she said, her voice thinner now, reaching for something that sounded like reason. You convinced yourself of something that is not even real. I shook my head slowly. No, I said. I let the story reveal itself. I paused, letting that sit before continuing. I did not confront you because I wanted to be wrong. That was the part she did not expect. Her eyes softened for a second, confusion mixing with something else. But you were not, I finished. The room felt smaller now, like the walls had shifted closer without moving. She wrapped her arms around herself again, not out of comfort, but because she needed something to hold on to. Why did you not say anything? She asked quietly. Why wait? I looked at her for a long moment before answering. Because I needed to see how far you would go, I said. No anger. No emphasis. Just truth. And that truth landed harder than anything else I had said so far. Because it meant this was never about one moment. It was about a line she kept choosing to cross, over and over again, thinking no one was watching. But I was. She looked at me like she was trying to find the exact moment this slipped out of her control, like if she could rewind far enough, she could fix it before it reached this point. But that is the thing about decisions. You do not feel them stacking until they collapse all at once. So what now? She asked, her voice quieter, stripped of the sharp edges she had been holding onto. That question was different. Not defensive. Not manipulative. Just uncertain. I walked back toward the table, picking up my phone again, not because I needed it, but because it grounded the moment in something tangible. Now? I repeated, almost like I was considering it for the first time. Now we stop pretending. Her eyes followed every movement, every word, like she was trying to read ahead in a story she was no longer part of writing. "You think this ends with you asking me to leave?" she said, a hint of disbelief creeping back in, like she was reaching for something familiar again, something that made this smaller than it actually was. I met her gaze steady. "No," I said. "This ends with everything being exactly what it is." She frowned slightly, confusion pulling her expression tighter. "What does that even mean?" she asked. I set the phone down again, this time deliberately, like placing a final piece into position. "It means this house is not ours," I said. "It has not been for a while." That stopped her completely. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice rising just enough to betray the tension underneath. "We bought this together." I shook my head once, slow. "No," I corrected. "We moved in together. That is not the same thing." The silence that followed felt heavier than anything before it. Not emotional. Structural. Like something underneath the surface had just shifted. 6 months ago," I continued, "I moved the property into a trust." Her eyes widened slightly, trying to process the words, the implication, the timing. "You cannot just do that without telling me," she said quickly, stepping forward again, but there was no confidence behind it now, just urgency. "Actually, I can," I replied calmly. "Because it was never jointly owned in the way you thought it was." That was the second shift. The deeper one. Because this was no longer about what happened tonight. This was about everything she assumed she had secured. "Why would you do that?" she asked, her voice breaking slightly now, the first real crack in the structure she had been holding together. I held her gaze, not unkind, not harsh, just steady. "Because I started seeing the pattern," I said. "And I decided to protect what I built before it became something you could walk away with." She shook her head again, faster this time, like she was rejecting the reality forming around her. "This is insane," she whispered. "You planned this?" I did not answer right away. I let the question sit there, because the answer was already obvious. Finally, I nodded once. "I prepared," I said. "There is a difference." And that difference was everything. Because planning sounds like revenge. Preparation sounds like survival. And in that moment, standing in the middle of a house she thought was hers, she realized she was not just losing a relationship. She was losing the ground she thought she was standing on. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out at first, like her mind had reached a point where language could not keep up with the reality unfolding in front of her. I watched it happen in real time, the shift from disbelief to calculation to something closer to panic. "You cannot do this to me," she finally said, her voice sharper now, reaching for control again, reaching for something that could push back against what I had just said. I did not react to the tone. I had heard it before. Not in moments like this, but in smaller ways, quieter ways, when things did not go exactly how she wanted. "I am not doing anything to you," I replied evenly. "I am letting the consequences catch up." That stopped her again, not because of the words, but because of how calmly they were delivered. There was no anger for her to fight. No emotion for her to redirect. Just structure. "You think this makes you look smart?" she asked, a faint edge of bitterness creeping in. "Like you are some kind of strategist?" I held her gaze, unblinking. "No," I said. "I think this makes me someone who paid attention when it started to matter." She let out a short breath, shaking her head, pacing now, her steps uneven like she was trying to find solid ground in a room that no longer had any. "So what, you just decided I was the enemy?" she asked, turning back toward me, her eyes searching again, this time for something she could still challenge. "No," I said. "I realize you stopped being on my side." That landed differently. Not as an accusation. As a conclusion. She went quiet for a moment, her arms dropping to her sides, the fight slipping just a little. "This is not how this works," she said more softly. "You do not just remove someone from your life like they never mattered." I nodded once, acknowledging the statement without agreeing with it. "You are right," I said. "You do not." I took a small step closer, not confrontational, just closing the space enough so she could not avoid the moment anymore. You remove them when they show you. They stopped valuing what you built together. The room felt still again, but not the same stillness as before. This one was heavier, more defined. She swallowed, her eyes flickering toward the hallway, toward the door, like she was already thinking about what came next, even if she did not want to accept it yet. I am still your wife, she said, almost like she was reminding both of us, like the title itself should carry weight. I let that sit for a second before responding. That is a label, I said quietly. What you choose to do with it is what gives it meaning. Her expression tightened, the realization settling deeper now. Titles did not protect actions. They never did. You are going to regret this, she said, not as a threat, but as something closer to hope, like she needed to believe I would feel something later if I did not feel it now. I looked at her, really looked, and for a moment I saw the version of her I used to know, layered underneath everything else. Then it passed. No, I said. I already worked through that part. And that was the truth. Because regret belongs to moments you did not understand. This was not one of them. This was clear. Deliberate. Final. And she could feel it, even if she did not want to accept it yet. She stood there like the room had tilted beneath her, like gravity itself had shifted and she was the only one who had not been told. For a moment she did not argue. She did not push back. She just looked at me, searching for something that no longer existed. Then it happened. Not all at once. Not dramatically. It started small. Her shoulders dropped. Her posture softened. The tension that had been holding her upright began to slip. Daniel, please, she said, her voice lower now, stripped of the sharp edges, stripped of the control. We can fix this. I can fix this. I did not respond right away. I let the silence answer first. Because sometimes silence says more than any explanation ever could. She took another step closer, slower this time, like she was approaching something fragile, something she did not want to break any further. It was a mistake, she said again, but the words sounded different now. Not convincing. Not even to her. It did not mean anything. I watched her carefully, not with anger, not with satisfaction, just with clarity. It meant enough for you to keep doing it, I said quietly. That stopped her. Completely. Her lips parted, but no argument came. Because there was none left that made sense. She looked down at her hands, like she was seeing them for the first time, like she was realizing they were the same hands that made every choice that led here. I did not think it would go this far, she whispered. That was the most honest thing she had said all night. I nodded slightly. That is usually how it works, I replied. People do not plan the ending. They just keep making decisions until they get there. She let out a shaky breath, her composure slipping further now, the structure she had been holding on to finally giving way. I will do anything, she said, looking back up at me, her eyes searching again, desperate now. I will cut him off. I will change everything. Just do not do this. I held her gaze steady, unmoved. You already showed me what you are willing to do, I said. Now I am showing you what I am willing to accept. That line landed harder than anything else. Because it shifted the entire frame. This was no longer about her actions. It was about my boundaries. And those do not negotiate. She shook her head, faster now, panic fully present, no longer hidden behind logic or excuses. You are throwing everything away, she said, her voice breaking. Everything we built. I let a small breath out, not tired, not emotional, just certain. No, I said. I am protecting what is left of it. The room felt smaller now, like the walls had closed in around a truth she could no longer escape. She stepped back slightly, like the distance might give her space to think, to find something, anything that could shift this outcome. But there was nothing left to find. Only what had already been decided. You cannot just erase me, she said softly, almost to herself. I looked at her one last time, not as the person I married, not as the person I lost, but as the person standing in front of me now. I am not erasing you, I said calmly. I am letting you face the version of your life that does not include me anymore. And that was the moment it fully broke. Not loudly, not visibly, but completely. The room stayed quiet long after the words settled, like even the walls understood there was nothing left to argue about. Olivia stood there, unmoving now, her eyes no longer searching for answers, just trying to absorb what was already decided. I did not rush her. I did not need to. Some realizations take time, not because they are complicated, but because they are final. I walked past her toward the kitchen, not to escape the moment, but to finish it on my terms. I picked up a glass, filled it halfway with water, and took a slow sip, letting the normalcy of the action ground everything that had just happened. Behind me, I could hear her breathing, uneven, like she was trying to steady herself against something that would not stabilize. So that is it? She asked quietly. Not defiant. Not emotional. Just empty. I set the glass down on the counter, the soft sound echoing slightly in the silence. That is it, I said. No hesitation. No explanation. Because anything more would only blur something that was already clear. She nodded once slowly, like she was agreeing with something she did not have the strength to fight anymore. Then she turned, her movements slower than before, and walked toward the hallway. I watched as she disappeared briefly, then returned a few minutes later with a small bag, not packed for a future, just enough to leave. That was the part people do not talk about. The moment when everything reduces down to what you can carry in your hands. She paused near the door, her hand hovering over the handle, like she was waiting for something. A word. A reaction. A reason to stay. I did not give her one. Not because I could not. But because I chose not to. She glanced back at me one last time, her eyes lingering, searching for something familiar. I never thought it would end like this, she said softly. I met her gaze steady, unchanged. It did not end tonight, I replied. Tonight is just when you finally saw it. That was the truth. The ending had been building long before this moment. Long before. The excuses? Long before the lies. She looked at me for another second, then nodded faintly, like she understood more than she wanted to admit. Then she opened the door and stepped out, the sound of it closing behind her quiet, but absolute. I stood there for a moment, not moving, not thinking, just letting the stillness settle into something real. No anger. No relief. Just clarity. I walked back into the living room, looking around at the space that felt different now, not empty, just honest. And for the first time in a long time, there was no noise underneath it. No doubt. No questions. Just a simple understanding of what remained and what no longer did. I picked up my keys from the table, turning them once in my hand before setting them back down. There was nowhere I needed to go. Nothing I needed to chase. Because sometimes the strongest move is not what you do next. It is what you decide to leave behind. And as I stood there, in a house that was finally quiet in the right way, I realized something simple. I did not lose anything that was still worth keeping.